The first gunshot shattered the cafe window before anyone even understood what was happening. Glass exploded across the marble floor, people screamed, and chairs crashed as terrified customers dove for cover. In the middle of the chaos sat a tired single father in a faded flannel shirt, holding a little girl who still had whipped cream on her cheeks from the strawberry milkshake she had begged him to buy. Most people barely noticed him before the masked men stormed inside. To them, he looked like every exhausted dad they ignored every day, unshaven, worn out, carrying the weight of life on his shoulders. Some had even laughed at him moments earlier when his daughter accidentally spilled juice across the table, and he quietly cleaned it with napkins while trying to comfort her tears. But 2 seconds later, the entire cafe would realize they had been sitting beside a man who moved with the speed, precision, and fearlessness of Delta Force. If you believe kindness matters, if you believe people deserve second chances no matter how broken they seem, take a second right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to EverKind Stories. Stories like this remind us that we never truly know the battles someone is fighting. Ethan Cole had once lived a life most people would never understand. Years earlier, he had operated in places the government denied existed, completing missions that never appeared in headlines. He had spent his youth learning how to survive impossible situations, how to read danger before it arrived, and how to protect lives even when his own life meant nothing. But none of those skills had prepared him for losing his wife. 3 years before that terrible afternoon in the cafe, Ethan had stood in a hospital hallway holding his wife's trembling hand as cancer slowly stole her away. He remembered the smell of antiseptic, the beeping monitors, and the moment she whispered her final request through exhausted tears. She asked him to promise that their daughter Lily would grow up knowing love instead of fear. Ethan had survived war zones, but nothing had broken him like watching Lily ask why Mommy was sleeping so long. After the funeral, the world moved on while Ethan remained trapped inside grief. The military medals in his closet gathered dust. The muscles that once carried him through combat missions now carried grocery bags, laundry baskets, and a sleeping child from the couch to bed every night. He traded tactical briefings for bedtime stories and spent sleepless nights wondering if he was failing as both a father and a man. Money became tight after he left military contracting work. Employers saw a quiet veteran with emotional scars and little civilian experience. Some interviews ended the moment they noticed the gaps in his resume. Others offered pity disguised as kindness. Ethan eventually found work repairing generators and electrical systems, taking whatever jobs kept food on the table. Every morning before school, Lily would braid his hair badly while giggling, and somehow those tiny moments kept him alive. That afternoon at the cafe had been special. Lily had earned an award at school for courage after standing up to bullies defending another student. Ethan promised her pancakes and strawberry milkshakes to celebrate. He wore his old flannel because it was the cleanest thing he owned, though it hung loosely over a body hardened by years of discipline. The cafe buzzed with wealthy professionals, polished shoes clicking against marble floors, expensive watches glimmering beneath warm lights. Ethan noticed the stares almost immediately. One businessman wrinkled his nose when Lily accidentally dropped a spoon. 2 women near the window whispered and laughed when Ethan carefully cut Lily's pancakes into tiny pieces because she still liked them that way. A younger man in a tailored suit muttered something about people who can't control their kids. Ethan heard every word, but he stayed silent. Pride had no place in survival anymore. He focused only on Lily, smiling whenever she laughed. Then the front windows exploded inward. 4 armed men wearing tactical gear stormed inside with military rifles raised high. Panic spread instantly. Customers screamed and dropped to the floor. One robber fired into the ceiling while another demanded wallets, jewelry, and phones. A woman near the counter froze in terror as her husband shielded her body with his own. The criminals moved with confidence, like men who had done this before. Lily buried her face against Ethan's chest, trembling violently. He wrapped one arm around her while his eyes calmly scanned the room, Every instinct buried inside him awakened at once. He noticed the leader's sloppy trigger discipline. He counted exits automatically. He tracked the spacing between the attackers. Most importantly, he realized something horrifying. One of the gunmen was high, nervous, unstable. Men like that were the most dangerous. The customers saw only a tired father clutching his daughter. They did not notice the way Ethan's breathing slowed. They did not notice how his posture subtly shifted. They did not notice his eyes transforming from exhaustion into absolute focus. One robber approached Ethan's table aggressively, shouting for his watch and wallet. Ethan slowly raised his hands while whispering to Lily to keep her eyes closed no matter what happened. The gunman sneered at him, mocking him for shaking. He called him pathetic, weak, useless. Then the unstable robber near the counter grabbed a young waitress by the hair. The entire room froze. She cried and begged while the rifle barrel pressed against her temple. Ethan saw terror spread through the crowd like wildfire. Nobody moved. Nobody knew what to do. And in that exact moment, Lily looked up at her father with tears in her eyes and whispered the words that shattered whatever restraint he had left. "Daddy, please help her." 2 seconds. That was all it took. The robber standing beside Ethan suddenly collapsed backward before anyone understood what happened. Ethan moved with terrifying speed, twisting the man's wrist until the rifle clattered across the floor while driving an elbow into his throat. Before the second gunman could react, Ethan kicked a chair across the marble floor with explosive force, smashing it into the attacker's knees. The rifle fired wildly into the ceiling as customers screamed again. The third robber turned toward Ethan, but Ethan was already moving. Years of training flowed through him like instinct carved into bone. He grabbed the fallen rifle, disarmed the wounded attacker with brutal precision, and slammed him into a table hard enough to splinter wood. Coffee cups shattered everywhere. The leader raised his weapon toward Lily. That was his mistake. Ethan crossed the distance almost impossibly fast. One precise shot destroyed the gunman's shoulder before he could pull the trigger. The final attacker tried grabbing the waitress as a shield, but Ethan's voice cut through the chaos like thunder. Calm, cold, controlled, the kind of voice that belonged to men trained for nightmares. The robber hesitated for one fatal second. Ethan ended it. Silence crashed over the cafe. Smoke drifted through broken sunlight pouring from shattered windows. Customers stared in complete disbelief at the same man they had mocked less than 10 minutes earlier. Ethan immediately dropped the weapon and rushed back to Lily, kneeling beside her and checking her tiny trembling hands for injuries before anything else. She threw her arms around his neck and sobbed into his shoulder while he whispered softly that everything was okay now. The waitress Ethan saved collapsed crying beside a table, unable to process what had happened. One businessman stared at Ethan with shame burning across his face. The women who laughed earlier couldn't even meet his eyes. Sirens echoed outside as police surrounded the building within minutes. When officers stormed inside, they found Ethan sitting quietly on the floor holding Lily in his lap, while the armed robbers groaned unconscious around the cafe. The investigation revealed the criminals were part of a violent robbery crew responsible for multiple deaths across the state. Detectives later admitted that several customers would likely have died if Ethan had not acted when he did. News stations exploded with headlines about the single dad hero. Security footage spread online overnight. Millions watched the exhausted father transform into a human force of precision and courage in mere seconds. But fame did not change Ethan. The next morning, he still packed Lily's lunch. He still braided her hair badly because she insisted he try. He still worried about bills and whether he was enough for her. Yet something inside him shifted after that day. For the first time since his wife's death, Ethan realized he was not just surviving anymore. He was still capable of protecting life instead of merely enduring pain. Days later, the cafe owner personally invited Ethan and Lily back for dinner after reopening the damaged restaurant. Employees applauded when they entered. The same customers who once judged him approached with tears in their eyes. One businessman admitted he had spent years assuming weak-looking people were failures. He confessed that watching Ethan protect strangers while risking his own life forced him to rethink everything about how he viewed others. Ethan simply nodded because he understood something most people didn't. Pain changes appearances. Grief can make warriors look broken, and the strongest people in the world are often the quiet ones carrying invisible battles. That evening, Lily sat beside the cafe window eating pancakes again, while the city lights shimmered outside. She looked at her father with complete admiration and asked if he had been scared during the attack. Ethan stared silently for a moment, before answering honestly in a way only a father could. He told her courage was not about being fearless. Courage was being terrified and still choosing to protect someone you love. Lily smiled softly and held his hand across the table. In that small moment, Ethan finally felt something he had not felt in years: peace. Not because he defeated dangerous men, not because strangers called him a hero, but because he realized he had kept the promise he made beside his wife's hospital bed. Lily was growing up surrounded by love instead of fear. And maybe that was the greatest mission he would ever complete. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you not to judge people by appearances, please like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to EverKind Stories for more emotional journeys that remind us humanity still exists in this world.